You're watching Channel 7 Live. This is the Success Strategies program with Anthony Kovac. Tonight I have Rick Puglisi. Puglisi is a foreclosure expert, and his foundation is Foreclosure Rescue Foundation. Rick, thank you for coming on, and I appreciate the time that you've taken to come out here all the way from Deltona Beach down here to Tampa and to tell the audience what needs to be done if they're in or getting close to a foreclosure situation. So tell us a little bit about the foundation.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. I really appreciate that. And I'm very proud to be the spokesperson for the Foreclosure Rescue Foundation. And the Foreclosure Rescue Foundation helps people that are in foreclosure who are experiencing financial difficulty to accomplish their goals. Whether those goals are to stay in their home at a price that they can afford, or to get out from underneath the property where the mortgage balance exceeds the market value of the property. And I tell you, I am really so proud of the people that work there. They are truly, consumer advocates, and they understand the foreclosure market and how foreclosures affect people, because it affects people, very deeply. Foreclosure can be an extremely traumatic and emotionally devastating experience for homeowners. And if they don't get, the knowledge that they need about what their situation is and what their options are, it's hard for them to make good decisions about what to do with their homes.
And is that one of the biggest problems, the fear factor on not knowing what to do? I mean, the process is basically foreign to a lot of people. It's not like you do it on a regular basis. Yep. But because of the market and what's happened financially in the United States, especially the financial and housing markets, people just don't know what to do. The banks just send them notices, and what do? You're calling, your bank has been bought and sold a dozen times, and your mortgages have been bought and sold 100 times. You don't even know who it is, and they're just an entity somewhere in the middle of nowhere.
Very true, and the fear factor is absolutely huge. We run into a variety of people that the Foreclosure Foundation works with. Some people bury their head in the sand and hope the problem will go away. Some of them are holding out for that last minute miracle. Others go out and try to seek out help with organizations like ours, or they try to find attorneys in order to help them out. But one of the biggest problems is that people don't realize that the banks are taking advantage of homeowners right now. They, for some reason, have the idea that because banks are these large institutions and they've been around forever, that they do everything by the book. And nothing could be further from the truth. There is a lot of fraud going on out there right now. I mean, you read about it in the newspapers every day. Let's
not get too ahead of ourselves. I don't want you answering all my questions on the first one. So,
yes, the fear factor is a huge thing, and people need to find out what their options are.
Very good. I definitely, that's important to know, because what you do in your company, your organization, is help people understand primarily what to do, what is the process, how they can get through this situation, either by protecting themselves or going through the process on what needs to be done, and to make sure that the banks are treating them properly. Is that mainly what your company is doing?
Yeah, actually, the foundation has a couple of main purposes. The first is to educate the homeowner as to what options are available for them. And then the second thing is, once you outline what the options are, is to develop a strategy to accomplish their goals, whether they want to stay in their home or whether they want to get out from underneath a property. The third thing then is to put them in touch with members of the attorney network that we have set up across the country. And then fourth is to basically hold their hand through the process and to kind of shepherd them, all the way through. Because like you said, there's that fear factor to start with. They don't really know what's going on all the time during the course of the process. Sometimes it just takes somebody to take all that legal jargon and put it into English for them at that point.
And that is true. Now, what about homeowners which level of homeowner can you help? Are we talking about those that are already in foreclosure, already been served? How far early, meaning do they have to be in foreclosure at this point? Let's start with, do they have to be in foreclosure for you to help them?
No. The foundation has many clients that aren't in foreclosure at this
But are
point.
getting close to it, in other words.
They're getting close. There are some that are behind. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
And then for those that are in foreclosure, you can guide them, let's say 2-3 months, let's say, when does foreclosure begin? What is the process?
Well, really the foreclosure starts once the homeowner receives either a list pendants or in trust states when they receive a notice of default.
How long does that take after the last payment is made?
You know what? It varies state by state, and it also varies by the lenders.
Yes.
There are states like Florida, for instance, where you might go 4 or 5 months, and other banks might go a year and a half. There are states like Georgia that pull the trigger very quickly. Once you're 30 or 60 days late, they can start that foreclosure process right away.
So nationwide, it varies from state to state.
Yep.
And depending on the legalities of the state law.
Sure.
Now, when it comes to once they're already in foreclosure, can you help them?
Oh, absolutely.
So you can help them before, get them ready if they're going that direction.
Mm-hmm.
If they're already in the process where they're late payments, you can help guide them through that.
Right.
And then if they're already in foreclosure, tell us about that.
Yeah, if they're already in foreclosure, and usually that's where the bulk of our clients come
Okay.
from. Once they receive that notice from the lender, now they know it's crunch time, and things are serious, and the lenders are just not going to go any longer without trying to foreclose on the property and recoup their investment. But the foundation has clients that are not in foreclosure, not even late at this point, because they've heard so much about the fraud that's going on out there that they want to take a look at their original mortgage transaction and see what's going on there, and quite possibly fire the first shot. Instead of playing defense, play offense. Go after the banks first. Ask them questions. Find out what they did.
So basically, at this point, most of the clients have been jumbled up into different bundles of mortgage securities, or what are they called? What have they been called?
Well, the loans have been securitized.
Yes.
Is basically the language, and it's a very complicated process. I can explain it to you in simpler terms if you'd like.
Well, we'll get into that. I believe I have that question somewhere inside this stack of stuff, but
Okay.
I just wanted to know. So they've been bundled in many various ways.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the banks or the current holder of the mortgage that is filing for bankruptcy may not even have the right to do so. Is that one of the issues?
You mean the ones that are filing for foreclosure?
Yes.
Yeah, there are many lenders out there that are filing foreclosures where they don't even own or hold the note. And because of the securitization process, it's almost impossible to find out who actually has the right to foreclose at this point.
And that's basically what's caused many of the problems in the housing business.
Oh, it's crazy. They took mortgages and they made sausage out of them, they just jumbled them together and they ground them all up and they put them into these securities. And I don't know if you've ever seen sausage being made or not, but
yes,
it's an
I
ugly
have
thing.
seen it made. It's not a very pretty thing.
Yeah, and you can't reverse it. I mean, once you do it, you can't turn around and bring it back into the original form that it was. And that's why things are so confusing, and that's why every homeowner should take positive steps to defend themselves, when they're in a foreclosure situation.
So what about people who've been misled or possibly been misled because of the way the mortgage was structured, and it's got all kinds of addendums and sausage been put into that contract that one day you got a $500 payment and it's like $1,900 3 weeks later.
Right.
What's that about? Explain what's happening there.
Well, in most cases, a lot of people back, especially over the last half a dozen years or so, got into these adjustable rate mortgages. But unfortunately, they didn't understand really how to do the math. That when it raises 2, 3, or 4%. The interest rate goes up like that, it doesn't affect their payment by $10, $20, $30. It affects it by hundreds of dollars every month. And in most cases, a lot of these homeowners weren't given this information, and this wasn't explained to them either before the closing or at the closing table. Now all of a sudden they get these horrendous bills from the banks and from the lenders, and they have not a clue how they got into that position.
What about, now we've discussed residential. Does this also affect commercial properties?
Yeah, it does affect commercial properties.
How does it affect commercial properties?
Well, basically the same way that it affects residential properties, only Commercial properties, there's a little bit of a difference, and the laws, again, vary state to state, but most people that invest in commercial properties are considered to be a more sophisticated type of investor. So there are foreclosure rules and regulations that will help residential properties and residential homeowners that don't actually cover people on the commercial side.
Now, when you talk about commercial side, you're talking about strip malls and stuff like that?
Right.
Now, what about those who are investors who have properties that are basically business, investments? How does it affect those people?
Investment properties are considered to be residential if they're from 1 to 4 family. So
okay.
Up to 4 family is considered residential. Over 4 family is considered to be commercial, even though there are people living in the properties.
Even if they have 20, 30 of them?
Oh, yeah. Well, as long as they're 1s or 2s or 3s or 4s, in those units, yeah, absolutely. And the foundation works with many investors that have kind of got caught up in this mortgage fiasco at this point.
Is one of the issues as well as not only did the mortgage go up in a lot of states throughout this, these practices that the banks have put together, as well as mortgage brokers who are just signing and filling out forms left and right. What about the state taxes and other things that increase the cost? Like the state of Florida became really bad during the hurricane season, where a lot of the insurance companies basically raised the rates 3-4-fold, maybe 4, even more, and who had the kind of money, especially those on fixed incomes in the state,
right,
were pretty much stuck from maybe a $300-400 a month, year insurance bill to maybe a $3,000 insurance bill.
Sure. And you have to look at, we kind of have almost a perfect storm going on right now. You have property values that are declining still at incredible rates. A lot of the properties here in Florida, for example, have lost 50% of their value in the last 3 or 4 years. You couple that with a glut of houses on the market right now that are being foreclosed on. Okay, so you got low-priced properties coming in. You also take a look at the fact that the credit lending industry at this point is still very, very tight. Okay, so that makes it even harder to move those properties. And then you look at the unemployment rate. As long as we're hovering around, 8, 9, 10%, you've got people that cannot afford to buy these houses at the same time.
Yeah, and that's pretty much the 9.2 that's supposed. Now that doesn't include those who are underemployed as well as those who basically have given up. We're basically at almost 18% unemployment.
I've heard numbers closer to 21, 22, actually, when you factor in, the people that have been out of work more than 2 years, the ones that are underemployed, and the ones that have just given up.
That's true.
The government doesn't count those statistics in there. If they did, it'd be pretty ugly.
So has that become a huge factor in the housing market being such a problem because so many people lost their jobs, could not buy and maintain their properties, even if they could have with the job, but because they lost their jobs, that really has destroyed the market?
Oh yeah, high unemployment is probably the number one factor. The number 2 factor is that prices for houses went up so much that a lot of people went back and refied their houses, cash out, refinanced, okay, and borrowed up to the hilt.
Yeah.
Now, that prices have gone, the other way. Most of the homeowners we talk to are upside down. We call it upside down when they owe more than what the property is worth.
Or underwater, for they say.
Underwater, yeah. Yep.
Now, what about homeowners that are basically have moved out? How does that affect them, but they still pretty much own the mortgage? Well, they still owe the mortgage, and they've already moved out of the property, and they consider it a loss. Can you still have those? What is the options for them?
Yeah, we can, and you have to remember that just because they vacated the property, they didn't give up their rights.
Okay.
They still own the property, and they still have the mortgage in place. And I have to be honest with you, and this is a real sticking point with a lot of us. There has been many, many cases that we hear of where the banks have turned around and called homeowners, and they've told them that their auction dates are within a couple of weeks and they need to move out. And this information was not true. These people haven't even started to go through the process yet, and they've packed up and they've moved. And only now they're finding out that they were deceived at this point into moving out of their properties. They certainly have the right to move back in, but as far as the Foreclosure Rescue Foundation is concerned, we can still help those people. And if they want to stay out of the house, then what the foundation will do is put in qualified tenants into the property and take the rents from that property and use it to fund the foreclosure litigation on behalf of those homeowners that have moved out. The nice thing about that is that the homeowners then get one of the best litigation teams available to fight on their behalf without having to take any money out of their pocket.
Really? Wait a second. So you do this at, you're the advocate for the homeowners without having, they don't have to pay anything up front to implement the foreclosure advocacy foundation doesn't require any upfront cost to this?
There's no upfront cost. Now, in the situation that you just talked about, the home is vacant.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to turn around and get the property in rent-ready condition if it's not already, and then bring that tenant in and collect the rents and use that money from the rents that we collect in order to fund the litigation. If the homeowner wants to stay in their home, and they are in their home at that point, there is no upfront fees, but there is a flat monthly fee that they'll pay for the services that the Foreclosure Rescue Foundation provides.
Oh, okay, so what else, how does that work? Do they call, is there a website? What would the website be? How do they contact the homeowner, the Foreclosure Rescue Foundation?
Okay, the Foreclosure Rescue Foundation has a website, and it's www.foreclosurerescuefoundation.org, and that's our main website. The main way, believe it or not, that we bring in our clients is that the foundation has affiliates in almost every state in the nation.
Yeah, okay.
And it's the job of these affiliates to seek out homeowners that are in distress, that are in foreclosure in various stages, or experiencing financial difficulties, and to let them know about the services that the Foreclosure Rescue Foundation can provide. And at that point, they'll send us in the information. We'll do a one-on-one consultation with the homeowner, try to find out what their goals are, educate them into what options are available for them, help them to develop a strategy, and then walk them through the process.
Now, what is one of the biggest frauds that have taken place in the foreclosure process that you've seen, other than the banks letting tenants know that they're being evicted and stuff like that? How does that work? What should they look for when they receive something like that from the bank? How do you know when you should? Is there a legal process that you get, or is it just some piece of letter, in a pink slip or something
well,
like that?
Depending upon the state that you're in, usually in most cases you have to be personally served.
When you mean by personally served, you mean by?
So in other words, somebody will knock on your door.
Yes.
Okay, and serve you with a summons or a subpoena or a complaint or a notice of default.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so now basically you have been notified that there is a legal action pending against that particular property.
And so if you received a letter, very likely just ignore it.
Oh gosh, no.
I mean, not ignore it, but it's not for you to just start packing.
No. And again, the laws varies from state to state. But in Florida, for instance, you have roughly 20 days to answer that particular complaint. But a foreclosure process in Florida, if you don't fight it, may take 3 or 4 months. If you do fight it and you fight it properly, it could take 2 to 3 years on the state level. And then if you have actionable fraud in that contract, probably another 1.5 years at the federal level.
Now, what kind of a fraud, actionable fraud, are you referring to? What have you seen so far that is something that people that are watching right now might look at and say, hey, that's happened to me as well?
Yeah. There's a variety of different ones. A lot of them people are unaware of. There are a host of TILA violations, which is the Truth in Lending Act. There's a whole host of RESPA violations, which is the Real Estate Settlement and Procedures Act. There are violations of HOPA, which is the Home Ownership Equity Protection Act. And a lot of these are made up by the federal government in order to protect homeowners during the buying and selling of properties. For instance, almost all homeowners should receive a HUD-1, which is a statement of all of the expenses that go along with the purchase of a property. And they're supposed to get that at least 24 hours in advance of the closing. They never get them. Never ever. There is a HUD brochure that homeowners are supposed to get that explains the process to them. They never see any of those. Other fraud violations that we see are basically contract fraud where you've been promised one rate and
Yes.
and given another. And a lot of
That
times it'll
happens
happen
all the time. It's like 3.9%. Oh, by the way, we couldn't get that on that day, so it's now
Yep.
4.2.
Yeah, and they tell you at the last minute when you're sitting at the table and you've got a stack of papers and you're waiting to get into that dream house that that you've always wanted, and you don't want anything to stand in the way. And they know people are like this. And they turn around and they employ these bait and switch tactics. And a lot of times this is not so much done by the lender, but it's done by the mortgage broker. And that needs to be looked at. One of the most serious violations we see is accomplished by the real estate appraisers.
In what way?
The houses are overvalued.
Okay.
All right, the houses have been overvalued. They're not worth what the homeowners paid for them.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
And when you can uncover these types of violations, now you're talking about having some serious ammunition to go back at the bank with and recover your losses.
Now, why do 95% of the people in the United States are not contesting the foreclosure process?
You know what, Anthony, they just don't know any better. They just don't. When people are in trouble like that, the first thing they do is if they don't run away from the problem and hope for a miracle, they'll turn to attorneys. Okay? But in a lot of cases, attorneys won't, give these consultations for free. They have to pay, and a lot of times they don't have the money to do that. The Foreclosure Rescue Foundation doesn't charge for those. They will spend as much time as they need to on the phone with homeowners to explain to them what their options are and what position they're in, okay, and what they can and cannot do in order to accomplish their goals.
Well, you mentioned attorneys. Now, do most attorneys are familiar with some of these processes, or those who are maybe in the real estate side of the business, or is it a special type of attorney that understands the foreclosure process and guide you through it like your organization, Foreclosure Rescue Foundation?
It's really a specialty area of real estate. There are a lot of real estate attorneys out there that basically practice, the buying and selling of the properties and transfers of ownerships and that type of thing. But for foreclosure litigation or foreclosure defense or prosecuting foreclosures, you're really looking for a litigator, an attorney that knows how to stand on their own 2 feet and fight in a court of law. Unfortunately, most of the attorneys that we come across are sadly lacking in the skills that they need to properly litigate a foreclosure. When the Foreclosure Rescue Foundation first got started, the first thing that we did was we went out and we sought out the best attorneys in the country. And we learned from their materials. We bought everything that they had and we educated ourselves. Then when we went out to open up the attorney network around the country, we started talking to these attorneys and talking about these different strategies and tactics, and the vast majority of them had no idea what we were talking about. We as non-attorneys, with a little bit of effort, had more knowledge at our fingertips than most of the attorneys that were out there. And we call them the 50 percenters. They were the attorneys that were out there that knew just enough on how to talk to a homeowner to get them to pay that upfront retainer, okay? And then after 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months, do nothing but delay the foreclosure, and then the homeowner loses the house in the process. So it's been a real trek to get to where we are right now, to get what we feel is the best team of foreclosure litigators.
Is that why some attorneys take months and months to process a case, mainly because they're pretty much learning what it is they're supposed to be doing?
Yes and no. Unfortunately, the vast majority of the ones we come across are satisfied with just doing the delay tactics at that point. So most of the delay is because the attorneys for the banks are so overwhelmed with the sheer volume of foreclosures that they just can't get back around to those cases for 2 months or 3 months or 4 months. In most cases, it's not the skill of the attorney that delays at that level. It's the court systems that are backed up where you can't get in for 3, 4, or 5 months. And it's the fact that the bank's attorneys are overwhelmed with the volume of cases that they have at this point.
Now, what is shadow inventory? I've heard this term bandied around in various ways, and it doesn't make any sense to me. Can you clarify that for me?
Yeah. Well, first, there's probably about 4 million homes that are foreclosed on usually in the process of a year. And as we discussed earlier, that all depends upon what states where the homes are in and how late those payments are. But shadow inventory is a term that's used for homes that should have been foreclosed on already because they are so far behind in payments, but the banks have not started the foreclosure process yet. And right now, we're talking about 6 million homes.
6 million.
6 million homes across the United States right now that are in shadow inventory. And can you imagine what would happen if all of those homes were foreclosed on at the same time and all those houses were to hit the consumer market?
So 6 million homes are in inventory to be more, foreclosed.
Mm-hmm.
So everything we've been hearing is actually a lot worse. And am I reading that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
That because it actually hasn't hit the real numbers that are actually in foreclosure.
Well, yeah, I mean, people think that we're halfway through or most of the way through this process, and we're not. In fact, we're very far from it. Shadow inventory right now is basically equal to the amount of foreclosures that have happened over the last 3 or 4 years combined.
Wow, that's like insane. Now, a while back, a few months ago, there was a 60-minute piece about robo-signing that the banks were a part of. Can you explain robo-signing? What does that mean, and how does it affect, or how did it affect those people that were robo-signed into foreclosure?
What you have to realize is back in the fast and furious days when all this stuff was being done and mortgages were given out to people that it should never have been able to qualify, that the banks were very, very lax on the paperwork. Okay? There was also a company, and there's still a company out there called MERS, which is short for Mortgage Electronic Registration System. And it was MERS' job to basically digitize all this information to effectuate the transfer of all these mortgages into securities and from one lender to another and one investor to another. And one of the things that they did was, as they digitized these documents, they destroyed the originals.
Ah, okay.
And in most states, you have to have the original note and the original mortgage in order to prosecute a foreclosure.
Really?
So now what happened was the lenders and these institutions that held these notes realized that they didn't have the paperwork they needed in order to prosecute all these foreclosures. So now they started making up the documents.
So making up documents. That's what that is.
Well, making up the documents, but robo-signing, basically they had these sweatshops with people in rooms that were signing other people's names to these documents that were purporting to be officers of various banks. And it was all bogus. And to make it even worse, they had other people in there, notaries, that were notarizing those signatures like they were true.
Really?
Now, we knew about this about 2 years ago when we first started this and we were looking into what was going on with the foreclosure market. 60 Minutes, finally got around to doing the story on it right now, but this has been rampant.
Why do you think the media has not really picked up on that earlier on when there was evidence that foul play was happening?
You know what? The wheels turn slowly. Even slower than the media sometimes is the judges that we run up against that don't bother to really take a look at these cases and to realize that just because it's a banking institution doesn't mean that these are fraudulent loans, fraudulent documents, defective documents that they're looking at. And then when the homeowners don't fight, there's no reason for them to have the lenders validate this bogus paperwork that they're putting forth.
Now, can you, is the foundation available to help people in all 50 states?
Almost. The foundation right now is in over 20 states. We're adding, on average, 1 to 2 states every week right now. We have a terrific team of people that are vetting lawyers in different states. And we're working as quickly as we can in order to cover all those states. But remember, we have specific criteria that these attorneys have to meet in order to become part of that network. First and foremost, their practice has to focus on foreclosure defense, foreclosure litigation. That's number one. Number two, they have to be true consumer advocates. Number three, they have to be willing to share their information with other members of the attorney groups that we have, and vice versa, in order to hone their skills on a daily basis to be the best that they can absolutely be. Number four, they have to be willing to put in the proper time it takes to litigate these foreclosures for clients of the Foreclosure Rescue Foundation. And last but not least, they have to be willing to accept reasonable monthly payments every month in order to defend the clients and prosecute the foreclosures like they're supposed to for the clients of the Foreclosure Rescue Foundation.
Well, I would assume so, because the banks have lots of experience. Your lawyer needs to be someone experienced to deal with this on a day-to-day basis rather than that once in a while. So for those who are, let's say, looking at just hiring a lawyer, and they don't want to go through an organization or whatever, what can they do really? Is really that an option? Or should they really look to an organization that can focus, that's already focused on this purpose by itself?
Well, the nice thing about the foundation is you can get that information without having to pay any kind of a consultation fee. And you can do it over the telephone from the comfort of your own home.
Oh, so just by calling the foundation, they can get all that information?
Absolutely.
And then take that to their local attorney if they wanted to?
Yeah, the problem with taking it to a local attorney is that, again, homeowners don't know what questions to ask. Usually what will happen is a homeowner will go in and sit down with an attorney and say, they're foreclosing on my house. I lost my job, I was out of work for 6 months, but now I'm back to work, and I don't make as much money as I did before.
Does he get that far before he gets a bill?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And there are attorneys that make you pay, upfront in advance before that consultation. But in effect, the whole story ends up with, can you help me? And those are not the questions that should be asked. The questions, and I tell everybody this, and I kind of laugh to myself every time I say it. And this is very important. 50% of the lawyers graduated in the bottom half of their class. Okay? Somewhere out there is the absolute worst foreclosure defense attorney in the United States, and somebody's got an appointment with that guy come Monday. Okay? You have to do your due diligence. In most cases, a home is a homeowner's most precious possession, and you have to do your due diligence in order to protect that investment. The questions that should be asked are, where did you graduate from? Does your practice focus on foreclosure defense? Do you work at the state level as well as the federal level? Are you familiar with mortgage fraud examinations? Are you familiar with securitization audits? How many homes have you gotten free and clear for your clients? How many of your clients right now are in a holding pattern because the bank doesn't know what to do because they don't have the proper paperwork? How many of your clients have lost their homes to foreclosure? Those are the questions that need to be asked. Not how much are you going to charge me every month? So
when you find fraud in the original mortgage transaction, what really can be done? Let's say there is no details. The original documents are not there, and if there are scanned documents that are robo-formed, what happens?
Well, it depends upon how many violations there are and the severity of those violations, because each one of them has teeth. When we talk about federal violations of the Truth in Lending Act and Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act and some of those things I talked about before with not getting the information before the closing, those are federal violations. Okay, and unfortunately, most of them, carry a small fine here or there and that type of thing. But when you start talking about contract fraud, when you intentionally defraud people, when you go in there and you tell them a house is worth $300,000 when it's only worth $250,000, when you turn around and you approve a loan for $300,000 for a guy who works 40 hours a week at McDonald's, that's predatory lending. You cannot do that. When you get to violations like that, you're talking about major fraud violations. And the great thing about the fraud statutes is that you don't sue for the amount of money that you were defrauded out of. You sue for the amount of money that you would have been defrauded out of over the entire
contract, yes.
The entire contract.
Amortized.
Right. Times triple damages.
Wow.
Times each and every violation. And what this means is that you could have a $150,000 home and $300,000 in violations. Okay? This is why everybody needs to explore the options that they have and take a hard look at what was done to them instead of just walking away or giving up or doing a deed in lieu of foreclosure or a short sale.
Is that one of the examples that you can help homeowners with?
Oh, absolutely. And when you have serious violations like that, There are a variety of different settlements that you can attain. The least of which is a mortgage modification. Okay? Up from that would be a mortgage modification with a principal balance reduction.
Now, a lot of people have heard that term loan mod or loan modification. Explain what that is, and is it actually possible? Because we hear so many weird stories about that, and the government talks about how much money they've been donating to it, but everybody seems to go back into foreclosure. Give us the skinny on that.
It's, first of all, a loan modification or a mortgage modification is basically the same thing. And it's where your lender agrees to modify the existing terms of your mortgage. It could be something as simple as lowering the interest rate, which would lower your monthly payment.
Can that be done without the state having to redock tax the mortgage?
Yeah, because all they're doing is changing the conditions of the mortgage.
So, but in the past, was that an ability that the banks had in the past where they can loan modify a mortgage? Because it's always been where like you have to go through a complete mortgage refinancing.
Right. No, you don't have to go through a refinance in order to do it. As a matter of fact, once people get a month or two behind, refi is out of the question because now their credit scores have dropped so much because they've missed a couple of mortgage payments that the banks won't touch them. Okay? So
a loan modification is not something that you have to go through a refinance, or the whole process of that whole process, as well as going through the whole taxation of, going through the state document tax and all that other stuff.
No.
Just the mortgage company says, okay, your interest rate is 9%, we're going to just lower it to 6.5 or whatever. And that's it. That could be done.
If it was only that easy.
Oh, okay. Why isn't it that easy?
You know what? It's not that easy for a variety of reasons. Number one, you have to go back to the securitization issue where all of these mortgages have been bundled up in the whole 9 yards. Like you said about the modifications to begin with, it used to be in the beginning you could get a modification and deal with a lender, okay, and get your terms modified. That was in the very beginning. And then what happened was they wouldn't give you a regular modification anymore. They'd give you a trial modification.
Trial, so.
Yeah, you know what, Mr. Homeowner, we're going to reduce your mortgage payments to this amount of money every month, and you pay us for 3 or 4 months on time, and we'll go back and we'll revisit your mortgage to see if we can make that permanent. I don't know one person yet where that mortgage was ever made permanent. And at the end of, and 4 months never happened. It was 4 months, then 5 months, then 6 months, then 7 months, and the banks were not getting back with these people. And finally, when homeowners pressed them, they said, I'm sorry, you don't qualify.
So it was a delay tactic.
Here's the dirty little secret. In mortgages that have been securitized, you have to remember that these mortgages were put up for collateral. In most cases at this point, the banks and the servicers are not in a position to modify those loans because when they securitized them, part of that securitization agreement said that you couldn't compromise the collateral.
So the collateral, because basically that security is basically, a pension plan.
Yeah.
A pension plan maybe for a teacher union.
Yep.
Or, a corporate owner or whoever. It's bundled into so many, stock market securities that no one knows how to make those modifications.
But here's the thing. The lenders have led the homeowners to believe that this is a possibility. Work with us, we can help you. Send us another check, send us another check, send us another check and another check, and it's bogus. And people need to know this. Okay,
now,
they're being victimized here.
Now, during the early days of this, the government had decided to put money into this area to help people restructure and loan mod some of these loans. What did that do to the mix? When they threw that shovel of dirt into it,
right?
What did that dirt do?
Well, they expected to help, I think, 3 to 4 million homeowners with that program. I assume you're probably talking about the HAMP program.
Yes.
And unfortunately, try as they might, it was basically an abysmal failure. I think they had 114 or 115,000 homeowners.
Was there ever a successful government entity that got involved into the private sector that wasn't a failure?
Well, you can't say successful government entity all in the same
yeah, that's an
sentence with a straight
oxymoron.
face. Yeah, you can't.
So
you can't
now,
do that.
we know that that's never going to be the case. Did the government actually create more muddling of the waters because they just threw money at the banks, and the banks just used that to just shore up
Yeah,
and just kept delaying?
But they didn't regulate what they needed to do with the money.
So those delays of, yes, we're going to do this, we'll give you a trial period of 3-4 months and all that stuff,
Bogus.
that kept them coming, the government was throwing money at them, but no one was getting the money.
That's right. And they got paid for attempts.
Uh-huh.
If you attempt to do this modification, we'll pay you money. If you actually do it, we'll pay you even more money. Right? And then people fall out
So
of
it was
the
just
program.
easier to redo attempts. I'll come back in 3 months. That's another attempt. That's another 10 grand, another 20 grand.
I had a friend of mine who had a home in Daytona Beach, about a half a block from the beach, that went into foreclosure. And he tried to do a loan mod for, I think, 6 or 7 months with his lender, and I won't mention the name of the lender. I should, but I won't.
It's up to you.
They finally sent him a letter after months and months of bank statements and all this and financial information going back and forth, and modified his loan by a penny. They took 1 cent off his monthly payment.
Is that a true story?
Oh yeah, absolutely true.
1 penny.
1 penny.
Now
Per month.
that's got to be a record, right?
You think so?
Probably most of the modifications
I'd
were
love,
that
to,
much.
I'd love to find out what that lender got paid for from the government to
Yeah.
modify that particular loan.
So let's see, homeowner X pays taxes that the government gave the homeowner, the banker, to modify his loan, and he got his penny back.
Oh yeah,
That's a nice one, right?
it's an ugly circle.
Now, how effective are, let's say, is short sale a possibility for someone who is in foreclosure? Can that happen? What are the options in that regard?
Yeah, and a short sale basically is when the lender agrees to take less money than what's owed in order to allow a homeowner to sell the property.
Yeah.
What most people don't realize is that only about 40% of the short sales are effective. The other 60% fall apart. And the reason they fall apart is because the banks are not responsive to those particular purchase and sale agreements. And after 3 or 4 or 5 months, the buyers get tired of waiting and they walk away. And
So-
the deals fall through.
So the process of a short sale is very tedious.
It shouldn't be, but the lenders make it that way. And we have to get into credit defaults and default swaps and derivatives to really find out, why it is the lenders are doing, what it is they're doing at that point. The other thing that you have to be aware of is that, we talked about qualifying attorneys to represent you.
Yeah, that's a big issue.
Yeah, when you do a short sale, you have to do the same thing with the realtors that are involved.
Ah.
Okay? And people think that any realtor can turn around and handle a short sale. Well, a short sale is a very specialized type of process. It's not easy, and it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of patience dealing with these lenders. And, there are questions that need to be asked of these realtors. How long have you been a realtor? What are your experiences doing short sales? How many short sales have you done over the past year? Have you done a short sale with my lender? Have you done short sales on properties in my price range? They need to be vetted like this. Otherwise, again, the homeowner does himself a grave disservice by not doing that type of due diligence.
So a short sale with the proper investor who specializes, let's say, in short sales, is that an option?
Well, with an investor, yeah, as well as with a real estate agent. But the biggest thing that you have to be careful of when you're doing a short sale is a deficiency judgment.
Explain the deficiency judgment. That is kind of like when the difference of what the short sale gets, for the bank,
Right.
you could end up still owing for the difference. Explain
Yeah.
it in real terms.
Let's say that you have a $300,000 mortgage, and the bank agrees to let you short sale your home for $200,000. Okay, there's a $100,000 difference there, and if you do the short sale without a clause in there that says that the lender will forego a deficiency judgment, that lender has the right to come after you for that $100,000, which is what they say their loss is, and they'll get it. And that deficiency judgment will haunt you until the day you die, because it'll attach to everything you now own or anything that you'll own in the future. And they can come in once they have that judgment and seize that property from you anytime they wish.
So basically, as a novice in this, if you were looking to do a short sale, the first question to ask is, what is the deficiency judgments you're able to set up?
Right.
And how do they come about? Do you end up getting, what's that called when the deficiency judgment is waived, or what is it?
Yeah, it's just they just waive the deficiency judgment. That's basically the terminology that they use. But again, it's about choosing the right realtor who knows what language to put in that contract. Because it's one thing for the bank to say, yeah, we'll let you sell your home for $200,000.
They don't care, as long as they still get their
right.
$100,000
It's another
later.
thing for that lender to say, we'll let you sell it for $200,000, and we won't worry about the rest of the money that we're going to lose.
And you want that in triplicates, right?
Oh yeah, quadruplicate. I mean, in
You don't want no roboform on that
big
one.
letters, as big as you can make it across the page.
Now, once a deficiency judgment, how does it affect the homeowner later on? Like, actually, we've kind of covered that one. You kind of went into that one.
Yeah, it really attaches to everything.
When the homeowner walks away, what happens? Why can't a homeowner just say, "Listen, you're the bank, you own the property now, you're the mortgagee. Just take it, go. I'm done."
Right.
Why can't they just do that?
Well, there's a couple of different problems that they have with that. The first is that when they just walk away and they don't fight, there's only a certain amount of time legally that they can put forth what we call affirmative defenses. In other words, take the bank to task and make them prove everything they need to prove in order to do that foreclosure. Okay, that's the first thing. So if they just walk away, they forego those rights in order to bring up those challenges later on. And the second is back to the deficiency judgment again. If they just walk away and they don't fight, the banks and the lenders can waltz into court, get that deficiency judgment, attach it to that homeowner, and then they have to carry that through. And it's just no way to live. I mean, it's just, when somebody can come in and attach and grab anything that you have at any moment in time, that's just no way to live.
I just want to retouch on some of the things. We kind of went over it briefly earlier on, as far as how all these mortgages were bundled and why it's so much harder now, and why everything is so interconnected, and it has pretty much destroyed the financial markets, not just in the United States, because
Globally.
they were sent, the markets were bundled in the trillions or in the hundreds of billions, and then sold into groups to other investors all around the world.
Right.
And the reason why some of these problems are existing is mainly because of how these securities are bundled and tied together, and they just can't unwrap them.
No, they can't.
So how do you help these homeowners unwrap and filter through all the crap to help them get to the point where, like, all right, I know the answer now. If my deficiency is, 20 grand, I could pay it off in the next 6 months at 3%, whatever.
Right.
How can you get them there?
Well, that's the challenge. And depending upon which state you're in, the burden of proof usually rests on the lender. They have to show that they have the right, that they have standing in order to prosecute that foreclosure. In a lot of states, they have to be the owner and the holder of the original note and be able to produce those documents. Now, here's the thing, and this is great. 3 or 4 months ago, the Kansas Supreme Court got into this whole securitization issue. And what they found out is when these lenders turned around and bundled all these mortgages together and transformed them into a security, it was necessary for them to separate the mortgage, which is a lien on the property, from the mortgage note, which is what everybody pays every month. Everybody talks about paying their mortgage every month. Well, they don't pay their mortgage every month. They pay the mortgage note every month, which is a promissory note.
Yes.
Well, in the process of securitizing these bundles, it was necessary for them to bifurcate or to separate the note from the lien, which creates a fatal flaw now because you have a mortgage note with no collateral. And you have a lien with no purpose because there's no note to go with it.
Nice.
Okay, so if you can successfully bring those types of arguments, it gets to be an impossible situation a lot of times for these lenders to prove their cases. Okay.
Now, was there a movie made about some of this stuff a little bit while ago? That was, I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, there was a couple of them, and I'll tell you what, everybody should rent these things and watch them. One was Too Big to Fail.
Too Big to Fail.
Too Big to Fail. I'm trying to think of what the other one was now.
Why is Too Big to Fail a good movie to watch?
Inside Job. The Inside Job was the second one.
Okay, so The Inside Job and Too Big to Fail. Why should they watch this movie?
You know what? I think everybody.
Are you the producer of the movie?
I wish I was.
You have nothing to do with
No. But Matt Damon and I look a lot alike. He was in the. I think he did the Inside Job.
Yes, I could see the resemblance.
Yeah. A lot of people mistake us. But no, they just did a phenomenal job. And I think that it's extremely important that homeowners across the United States really find out about what happened here. Because most people are in trouble and in deep financial trouble through no fault of their own. The banks and the lenders created this bubble. They drove these housing prices up. They purposely gave loans to people that they knew could not afford these loans, okay? And then on top of it, and this is the worst situation of all, you've heard of credit default swaps and derivatives, but there are very few people who know what they are. And there's a reason for it, because they don't want you to know what they're for. Credit default swaps and derivatives are nothing but a fancy word for insurance.
Aha.
And when these lenders made loans to people that they knew were not going to be able to continue to make payments, they bundled these things in special bundles, and they knew that these things were going to go bad. And they insured them. And they insured them through companies like AIG.
That's why AIG had to be bailed out.
Right, yeah, and listen to how this works. Without the homeowner's permission and without the homeowner's knowledge, they actually purchased insurance that bet that those homeowners were not going to be able to afford those mortgage payments every month. And when they default on the payments, or when the bank gets to foreclose on the properties, the lender collects on the insurance. But in some cases, the lenders were allowed to insure these properties up to 50 times over.
Nice.
So let's take an example of somebody with a $100,000 house.
Go ahead.
The bank has insured it 25 times over. He defaults on his mortgage. He wants to get a loan mod. The bank looks at the numbers and says, hey, if we turn around and foreclose on this property, we collect $2.5 million. Why would we ever let this guy do a short sale? Why would we ever let this homeowner do a modification? It's not in the best interest of the bank. And the banks will always do what's in the best interest of the bank.
Now, some of the things early on during many administrations, I believe it started during the Carter administration, where certain banks had to, were accused of redlining certain neighborhoods and were forced by the government to give out loans to people that may be on the border. How did that affect the whole mess we're in now?
Well, that was one of the starting points, but really if you go a little bit further down the line and you look at basically what Clinton did and the two Bush administrations did.
Because the Clintons, I believe, increased the amounts of loans that could be no collateral, no nothing loans.
Yeah, in the Bush administration, I believe, and I might be wrong on the numbers, but what used to happen is the banks could usually leverage 10 to 1. If they had $1, they could go borrow $10 from the Treasury. Okay. During the Bush years, I think they moved that number to 40. So they were able to leverage, for every $1 they had in deposits, they could go borrow $40.
I think it went up to 53 during the Clinton administration.
Right. And they were allowed to pump more and more and more money into the system that they really didn't have.
Okay. And I remember, because I follow politics to some degree, and during the last Bush administration, some of the stuff they tried to rein some of this stuff in with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac,
right?
Because they pretty much insure everything.
Right.
The banks, how does it work? Is it the banks take on a mortgage knowing full well that the federal government, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, who's a arm of the federal government through a sub-corporation, can guarantee that mortgage. They basically just sell it to them.
Exactly.
Is because it was that easy that they can take the risk of giving someone who didn't really qualify because they're the front line, and then 6 months later, you bought your mortgage from Bank A, and now it's another bank 6 months later. Is that what happened?
Yeah. Or you bundle it and you securitize it, okay, and you sell it off to pieces to other governments and to pension plans and pension funds and these huge conglomerates. And you even you make it even murkier when you have these agencies that rate these bonds and these securities, in on that whole situation and rate these things as very secure investments when nothing could be further from the truth.
Now, we've heard that in the news that homeowners would come home, and their home would be just relocked, all the doors and keys. None of the keys would work on their home, and they couldn't even get in. Yeah. How does that work? How can they do that?
These are harassment tactics that some banks employ. Some to harass, and I'm sure, and some because they are just so negligent about doing what it is they do. In most people's mortgages, there is a clause in there that says the bank has the right to secure their property if necessary. Okay, which means that if somebody was to abandon their home, the banks have the right to go in and make sure all the windows are locked and lock the doors and change the locks on the doors and this kind of stuff. But there have been, I can't tell you how many numerous cases where the banks have sent people out to change the locks on doors of properties that are still occupied. Sometimes with the people still in it, where they're changing the locks on the outside of the doors and that people are still living in the houses. It's ridiculous, the tactics that they employ.
What about those who received auction notices that their home is now ready for auction and it's going to be on 3 weeks from now? So how do you deal with that?
Well, we hear about it over and over again, and the way that the foundation tries to deal with that, number one, is to educate its prospects or its clients as to what exactly they can and cannot do. That's number one. The second thing is that because there are paralegals that are part of our team, that they can actually go into the court records and find out whether those sale dates are for real or not. Okay?
Well, go ahead. Finish up.
I'm just saying that there are all kinds of different ways that we can use public records to our advantage at that point to make sure that these homeowners aren't taken advantage of.
Well, just want to go over some of the cool terms that we have gone over this in this segment today. Now, we have foreclosure loan audits. Forensic loan audits. What is a forensic loan audit?
A forensic loan audit is basically the same as a mortgage fraud examination. And it's an examination by professionals of all of the circumstances that surround a mortgage transaction. And the Foreclosure Rescue Foundation uses a couple of different firms to accomplish this. One of them is staffed by nothing but retired judges and attorneys that particularly look for contract fraud, and this is a line-by-line audit of the mortgage transaction. Now, they're not only looking at the lender, but the mortgage broker, the real estate appraisal, the real estate agent, the title company, any inspection companies that were involved in the process, even other lawyers that were involved in that particular transaction. The neat part about it is that in most cases, what they find is in black and white. It's in concrete. They find it, they use it. There's no way that these guys can defend against what it is that they did. How do you turn around and justify somebody who's making $8 an hour, working 40 hours a week, that this person was granted a loan for a $225,000 house? It's predatory lending on its face. You don't usually have to go much further than that. But we've actually seen cases where the documents that the mortgage brokers have put in have been totally falsified, where the mortgage brokers have made up all of these numbers and put it in so that the client can turn around and qualify for the loan. The mortgage broker gets the big commission.
So technically what took place was not that the person was making $8 an hour that got the loan.
Mm-hmm.
It was the fraud of all the paperwork that was submitted to make the client look like he could afford the loan.
Sure.
But the reality was he couldn't.
That's correct.
So at 1% or 0% interest for the first 2 years,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, everybody could afford
Oh,
a
yeah,
loan
teaser
there.
rates and that kind of stuff. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Now, what about, we went through mortgage modifications, mortgage mods. We'll just briefly I want to just go through all the main points so people that may not picked up the differences in some
Okay.
of these things. So mortgage modifications.
Mortgage modification is when the lender modifies the terms of the existing loan. And by the way, that can go up as well as...
Yeah, they could
As well as
reverse
down.
you the other way.
Well, sure, because, let's say you miss a year's worth of payments, and they were $1,000 a month. Well, that's $12,000, right?
Uh-huh.
Well, they can take that $12,000, roll it back into the mortgage again, redo the numbers, and come up with a higher payment for you every month.
So explain that. I mean, you're saying that a bank, can take what you owe, rebundle it, and remortgagize you, throw that 12 grand on top on the end, and re-amortize that for the next 30 years.
Oh, yeah.
And throw in an extra 2 points of interest on it.
Yes, absolutely.
Nice.
Yep, and to tell you with a smile on your face how much they enjoy working with you.
Now, we've heard a lot about this. We see it on TV. We see a lot of older actors who talk about reverse mortgages.
Right.
Tell me about, what is this? What the hell does this mean?
As a matter of fact, it's getting harder and harder now to get reverse mortgages. But reverse mortgages are for people over 65, I think, or 67 years old that have equity in their property.
Well,
Okay.
no equity out there now.
No, it's they're few and far between. But basically, in a nutshell, these people stop making their mortgage payments every month and actually get a payment from the lender every month, which is the reverse part of that, the reverse mortgage.
So basically, you're saying that the mortgage company is basically buying your house.
Yes, they're basically buying your house back, right.
And then kind of like interest paying you on a monthly basis.
Right.
Until you pass away.
Right.
And like the Grim Reaper shows up and,
yeah.
and takes your property.
And that's basically, it goes until basically you pass away. And that was,
and it could be the first month, it could be the...
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? It worked real well when you were in a housing market where the prices of the homes were going up and up and up and up by the day.
Yeah.
Now, these lenders have turned around and put out all these money on these reverse mortgages, and now the houses are only worth half of what they were before.
What do they check for collateral? They check your...
They don't.
They check your medical records. Collateral.
Yeah, that's about it. I mean, they look at they look at what your house is worth, how much equity you have in it. Do you have a pulse? How strong does it seem to be?
Exactly. It's like, so hypertension, check.
That's it.
Kidneys.
That's right.
Bad kidneys,
right.
check.
Can you see me, Mabel? Mabel, over here, Mabel.
3 heart attacks, check. Yeah, we'll give you the money.
Sure. Exactly.
So let's see. Now short sale. Deed in lieu. I mean, we kind of went over short sale pretty, intensely. Deed in lieu.
Deed in lieu of foreclosure is basically what it sounds like, where you deed the property back to the bank instead of the bank doing a foreclosure.
Oh, okay.
Again, though, you have to watch out for the pitfalls because you still have that deficiency judgment.
So you got a deed in lieu with the waiver of...
Exactly, right. Because, one thing, it's okay, fine, you know what, we won't foreclose on you, just sign us over the deed. Well, thank you very much. Now we sold it. It was $60,000 less than what we had in it, and now we're coming after you for the $60,000.
So you want to make sure that your contract says, because they don't care what they sell it for, because they're going to put a mortgage on your life to pay for the difference.
Well, you have to remember the other part behind that also. These banks got bailed out. They got TARP funds.
Yeah, they got, exactly.
Well, what did those TARP funds pay for? They were supposed to take some of these toxic assets off the lender's books, right? Well, how do you know that that home wasn't in that group and they paid that home off completely already, yet they're still coming back after you a second time for the money? The same thing with the credit default swaps and the derivatives that were insurance, right? They turn around and got paid, yet they'll still try, in some cases, to come back after you and get paid again.
So you have to basically make sure that whatever the deficiency is, all your paperwork is that you've been cleared and that the bank will not then tag your credit
Right. And in fact, the language for that usually says that the bank will accept those funds in full satisfaction of the mortgage and any outstanding debts owed to that particular lender.
So if it doesn't have that language,
Oh boy, run for the hills.
you're basically going to... Now, bankruptcy, how does bankruptcy affect, the homeowner?
Well, you have two different types of bankruptcies. Chapter 7, which is total liquidation, and Chapter 13, which is kind of a workout plan. Bankruptcy is one of the options that are available for homeowners that come up against a sale date or coming up a sale date very quickly. They can file what's called a suggestion of bankruptcy, which basically will stop that sale in its tracks. And depending upon what state you're in, it might buy you 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, maybe even more, so that you can get some good attorneys in there to take a look at what your case is and see what options are still available, for you. But bankruptcy does not ever stop a foreclosure. All it does is slow it down. Okay?
Well, that's
It
not really a
doesn't
good
stop.
choice in reality.
Well, I'll tell you what. We have a variety of different clients at the foundation, and especially the last few weeks, and I don't know why the trend was that way, but we got a variety of different clients that came in that had sale dates in 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. Well, that's just not enough time for attorneys to react and be able to file motions to stop this. So in some cases, they'll file a suggestion of bankruptcy. It'll turn around and delay that process now for 30, 60, 90 days and give the attorneys the opportunity to take a look at all of the facets of that case to find out what can still be done to either help this homeowner save his home or to help him get out from underneath it without that deficiency judgment.
Now, Rick, we're pretty much at the end of the program.
Okay.
And this has been an exciting opportunity to learn a lot about what it is that the Foreclosure Rescue Foundation does. Can you wrap up in a nutshell, what should people do in the situation if they're getting close to approaching or in? Obviously, the Foreclosure Rescue Foundation is what you want them to do. Call your organization to help them out.
Mm-hmm.
Give us, what should they do first? What is the first thing psychologically that they should approach this situation?
Yeah, the first thing is don't run and hide. Don't let the fear, take over. Fear usually comes from the fact that people don't know what to do. There's an indecision there. Okay. The first thing that they need to do is they need to get educated. They need to call, foundations like ours, the Foreclosure Rescue Foundation, and talk with one of the counselors that are over there and find out what their options are. Okay. The people that they talk to at the foundation have no axe to grind. There is never a sales pitch, never ever a sales pitch. These people are there to educate these homeowners, to let them know exactly what their options are, and then depending upon what they want to accomplish, help them to develop that strategy. And then give them the tools to accomplish that. Here's the network of attorneys that we work with. And we can work with them all along the way to basically hold their hand through the process and guide them through the whole thing. And I go back to what I said earlier about, a home being most people's most precious possession, and they have to do their due diligence, and they have to get the professionals who really know what they're doing in order to take on these cases. Most people and most attorneys don't realize that there are remedies at the federal level. They fight in state court and they lose, and they throw up their hands and they say they're done. Well, that's not the case. There are remedies at the appellate level. There are remedies at the federal level, and there's good remedies. Okay? It's just like if you had a very serious operation that you would have to have. Do you go for the cut rate guy, or do you try and seek out, the best that's in your area, or it may be in the nation to help with your particular problem? This is not a time to get rookies in the game. Okay? This is a time to seek out the very best professionals that can help you through the process, and don't give up. Don't ever, ever give up. You never know until you get into these things what cards the banks are holding. okay? And you never know until you get through discovery or get through a mortgage fraud examination or a securitization audit to find out exactly what they did. In most cases, some of these are unregulated industries, but in most cases, the homeowner has the right to this information. They just need to know who to ask for it and how to ask for it, and then act on that information in order to accomplish their goals. And we take our job very, very seriously at the foundation. There isn't a week that goes by, I think, where we don't talk to somebody who is contemplating suicide.
Really?
That their relatives can't or won't help them. Their friends can't or won't help them. The financial institutions won't look at them twice. They believe from everything that they've been told, whether it was from their lenders or their social circle, that in a few more days they're going to be out in the street and they'll have nothing. And it's for those reasons that we do everything we can in order to assemble the absolute best team of litigators that we can to help these people. It's a very, very serious problem. Because it's so big and so widespread, people have a tendency to look at the loss of the property and not the loss to how it affects the people and those homeowners. For some, this is all they have. And they haven't been educated as to what their options are. The media certainly hasn't done a very good job of it. And they need to. They need to do a much better job. And hopefully through programs like this, more people will be educated as to what's going on. We have a video that's online. It's at www.frfvideo.org. It's only about a 13 or 14 minute video presentation, but it kind of outlines some of the things that we talked about here today, what homeowners should do. And we hope that they'll take advantage of what the foundation can offer, and hopefully accomplish what they're looking to accomplish.
Well, Rick, thank you very much for taking the time. Rick
My
Puglisi.
pleasure. Anthony, thank you so
Rick
much.
Puglisi with Foreclosure Rescue Foundation. I'm Anthony Kovic with Success Strategies, and we'll see you next week.